Namaste, I'm Dr. Rishi, and here to discuss regarding the topic of whether Yukti Vipashraya is everything in Ayurveda, as we have our contemporary understanding regarding the same subject. So when I say Ayurveda, it's not just when I say we, it's not just the common public, but even the physician's mindset is that of either something physical that we give herbs or we give some minerals or we give some therapy again. So all of these are physical modes of intervention in a medical condition. And even for the Ayurvedic graduate, this is what comes to mind. But my questioning or my interest in this subject, it came about when the moment I finished or completed my graduation. And so after I completed my formal graduation in Ayurveda, which is the BAMS course, which is Bachelor for Ayurvedic Medicine and Surgery, at the end of my course, towards the end of internship, and even for a while after that, I felt like there was something that was majorly lacking in what I had studied or understood. It's not what I studied, it's what I understood and what I was taught. So after my course had completed, I felt like there's a big lacuna in my understanding of the science. And this lacuna was something that I couldn't really put a finger on and point out as to what was missing, but I knew deep within that there was something that was missing in what I had studied. And so in the pursuit of trying to fill in that empty gap, because this is a gap that I don't know what is going to fill it in. So I know there is an empty space, but I don't know what is going to fill into this empty space. So it becomes a search. So it was a wild journey, and I went off on a search for a master. And when I say a master, it is someone who has basically not just intellectually understood the science, but has perceived it. Because the science of Ayurveda or any Indic science for that reason is something that you realize. It's not something that you learn. It's not something that you grasp. So it's something that you realize, and that's the means or the two means of education when it comes to the Indic sciences. So I was in search of someone who had understood or perceived, not just intellectually, but had realized what the science is trying to convey. Because the science of Ayurveda or Siddha or Varma, any of the Indian medical sciences, these are given in a codified form. And when I say codified, it is codified in a manner that you do derive a superficial understanding by reading it as it is or studying it as it is. But it requires, it really requires a guru, because like we say, the guru is someone who makes you realize something, and that is something that really applies in this context of education as well. So I didn't want, it wasn't the spiritual master I was looking for. It was very simple that I wanted a person who was rooted in the science. So in this pursuit of trying to fill in the gap, I actually came across Siddha Vaidya. So he was in fact a yogi, and I never knew about the fact that he was a yogi until 1 year had passed. Because neither was his physical appearance so, nor was his demeanor or attitude that ever showed that he was a yogi, or he didn't display any of it. He was very simple, down to earth. He led a normal life, apparently normal life. But it was this master who helped me understand the intricate and the more subtle aspects of what Ayurveda itself was talking about. So it really took me, not just to discover a master not from within the system, but from outside and from another system, a parallel system of medicine, who in fact, you know, poured light upon the more dark or ununderstandable aspects of our science. And these dark or ununderstandable aspects of our science is what we are calling and considering as the Deva Vipashya Chikitsa. And this has gone under a lot of scrutiny, controversy, because in the in the mainstream curriculum, when it comes to the Ayurvedic education, this portion of the education is being discussed, or it's being heavily discussed as to whether we need to remove it or not. But we find that the whole core of our science, the backbone of our science, lies in these other aspects that are not just the physical interventions. So what is this? What is this mysterious part? Or why is it so mysterious? Is that It's mysterious for the simple reason that the word, the name itself gives us a clue that Deva Vipashya. So Deva isn't necessarily supernatural. It's not just divine. It is something that's beyond. So that's all that it means. When you say something is Deva or in a state of Deva, so Devam, you have these different terms used in colloquial in colloquial terminologies when they address the deities and gods. So the Devam is a god or it's a supreme being, whereas the Daivam is nothing but a superior being. So it's another state of existence, but it's not the supreme deity either. So in the same understanding, when you look at what Daiva Vipashya Chikitsa is, these are modalities of intervention, or it's not just treatment, these are intervention. Because we limit our understanding of Ayurveda as merely a physical science, as a treatment, as a system of medicine that's meant to heal your body and to an extent your mind, and that helps you lead a happy life. But the true purpose of these sciences, the Indic sciences, and including Ayurveda, is to take you beyond physicality. So it takes you from dharma, artha, kama, and finally it leads you to moksha. So when we are talking about this long process, it's a more far-sighted process of healing. So it's not just healing from your physical condition, from a physical disorder or a state of dis-ease, or be it psychologically dis-ease, or basically a state of uncomfortableness. But it is a science that takes you beyond the what we consider as the loop of life. So we talk about Mahajwara. So when we talk of Jwara in the first context, you find mention of something known as the Mahajwara. So what he considers as Mahajwara, so I don't want to translate the word Jwara to fever. It's not as simple as that. But it's a state of transformation. There is something that's transforming inside, and when this transformation goes out of hand, we call it Jwara as a disease. But the term Jwara is something that happens on an everyday basis, every second within your body. But the greatest Jwara is, as what Acharya Charaka, our amazing scientist who broke down the principles of physical existence and that of the existence beyond. He gives a beautiful understanding of Mahajwara, which talks about existence itself as a disease, as the fact of you being here in this physical realm or in this physical reality, in Maya, as a cause of your own karma. And your way to come out of the karma is to follow your dharma. So it becomes a loop. And if you go anywhere, if you make a mistake anywhere, if there's any sort of deviation from this path that is meant of karma and dharma, that makes you get stuck in the loop of life and death, life and death. So the whole purpose of the science, the Ayurvedic science, is ultimately to bring you out of this loop of existence known as Mahajwara. So there we find the application. So it's not just that we're talking about the spiritual aspects of healing, but we're talking about something more deeper in regard to what is the purpose of your life. So Deva Vipashya Chikitsa, it has its importance not just in guiding you or providing spiritual wisdom, but we find that all of the physical disorders, the physical conditions, as well as the psychological conditions, they take their root from from the cause of your existence. And what I mean by this is that so any system, and I would like to use the example of an electronic system, is that every hardware is designed, its physical shape, for example, a mobile phone or a laptop, it's designed the way it should be to carry out a specific function. So this is the basis of how a hardware gets designed. And now what is behind this is the software. What is programming this? What is making this function? What is running the system from within? So the programming or the software is the factor that determines, how your system is going to work. So you see that depending on the software or how your system is going to work, you design the hardware for it. So you have a software which requires a higher processor. Your entire system needs a bigger and stronger build. So the structure or the hardware depends upon software, and ultimately the software it depends upon the coding. So before you put your software into the system, there is the part where you do coding. The coding is the one that determines. So just a set of code. The code doesn't do anything physically. The code doesn't move around. It doesn't go and switch on things, makes transfers data. The code is just a code. It remains. But the coding determines how your software is going to work. It's the same. It's quite literally the same thing that happens with the human body and physical existence. So this body, each of us, we say, all of us by now know what this understanding of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha bodies. So you have different constitutional bodies, and even in the different constitutions, you find so many micro variations. So each one body, the physical body, is being designed based on how the body is functioning on the inside. So you see that the doshas determine the dhatu, that is your software or the functioning determines how your physical structuring is. But what is guiding or determining how the doshas should function in the body? Why does each one have a different combination of constitution? Why someone vata pitta? Why somebody else pitta kapha? Why somebody else pitta kapha but with a different ratio and proportion of the pitta and kapha in their body? So you find all of these differences for the simple reason that each one has a different purpose to carry on. So this final coding that determines how the doshas are going to work, how the vayus are going to move inside. So there is this coding inside that tells your body that this is you, this is how your system is supposed to function, and it functions accordingly. So this coding is what we consider or call as the Atma. So the Atma is not a spirit, it's not a ghost, it's not a white shadow. It is it is information. It is your consciousness, it is your information which finds a medium of energy to function through. Even when it doesn't have a medium to function through, it's just floating around. The data is all around them. It's this the empty air around me right now. That I'm probably holding up on my hand. It's filled with information. Every single molecule, every single atom is filled with information. But this information finds a medium to manifest or to function when it finds something more physical, when it finds energy to bind itself to and to transmit. And this energy then leads to the creation of the material reality. So if the whole cause of physical existence and the cause for physical disorders, disease, disturbances ultimately arises from this coding, this factor of coding within you. So that is your Atma. And the Deva Pasya Chikitsa goes into this final, more subtle understanding of it. So instead of you trying to fix that the body which is going out of order each and every single time, instead you just need to understand how to tweak the code inside. So you have these hacks. It's quite literally what I would call as a hack, because a hack it's like basically having a phone, and I think most of us know what the process of jailbreaking the phone is. That when you get a device, it's meant to function at say 60% or 50% efficiency, considering all factors. But you want your device to work at 100% or at least 90% efficiency. So you go into your system, you tweak the coding, you play around, you reset the codes and make this function at a more supernatural state. So it functions beyond what it's designed to function, though the coding was always present within it. So that is what Deva Vipashya Chikitsa goes into. It goes into hacking the core dynamics of your body. And when you have those factors, you don't need to worry about this more superficial, the functional dynamics of your body or the structural nature of how your body is going, what is going to undergo. Instead, you're going to the source within yourself to correct. So that is what Deva Upashya Chikitsa is. And the reason that it lost its relevance was because of a misunderstanding, misrepresentation, mistranslations. Because when we say Devapatiya Chikitsa, it's automatically, labeled off as something esoteric, something occult. And so if I were to use the word occult while I'm talking about medicine, it automatically creates, that little stain in your mind when you think of it. And that's what has happened with Devapatiya Chikitsa. In fact, it's rather something that's much more subtle. Subtle in the sense is you need a more intricate thought process and analytical ability to understand what is making things function that the way that they are. Instead of just looking at how things are functioning, you're going one step beyond it. You're going beyond the doshas. You're going beyond the dhatus. You're going into the movie, and you're going even beyond the energies of the body. What is fueling your body? So you're going beyond all of this into the core of your existence. So that is where Deva Pasya has its role. And it is relevant once again because I think we have in the current era, we have the right language, the right tools to communicate what it is. And this was lacking earlier. And you look at who practiced the Deva Pasya Chikitsa more, where quite literally the yogis, the siddhas, the rishis, and other seers. And when you're a seer, you don't merely intellectualize a concept. It's not just an intellectual understanding that you have of it, that you study from the book and you grasp it here. It is something that you perceive. And when it comes to more subtle or more core understanding of what is uh, functioning or what is powering the dynamics of life, these things have to be perceived. You don't just look at, you can't be bothered with everyday life, and you can't, when you're bothered with everyday life, your mind only perceives things for what it sees, what it can perceive physically through the sense organs. But to go a step beyond, you need all of your senses, you need to go beyond your sensory perception. And you need to understand why are things happening the way that they are? What is the step beyond it? What is behind this process? And so the seers, in fact, they realized this. And for them, it was a realization and it was something more experiential than theoretical. So you will find that all of this information was always, it was always codified with, you find a lot of this references of Preta, Pishasha, Yaksha, Raksha, Gandharva. So again, now when I talk of all these names, they seem like ghosts, different sort of, demigods and fairies and other beings. But in fact, when we go and understand these things deeper, all the clues have been given through the text. It's just that we are not being able to make the right connections. And because we limit ourselves to the text again. So the text itself tells you to go beyond the text, to look into other sources of knowledge, other parallel lines of streams of Indic knowledge, and they hold the clue to decoding what these are. So all these supposed ghost names, like the Yaksha, Raksha, Pishasha, these are not demons or devils, but these are the different aspects of your own functionality, your own mental, the state of your mental awareness, and how much the level of your awareness determines the level of your perception. And when I say perception, so I would look at a phone or I would look at an object, a piece of wood, and I would see it as a piece of wood which has been painted red. But someone with a higher level of perception, the brain, which is a supercomputer, automatically makes a calculation about why the piece of wood is red in color or why is the piece of wood are the way it is. So he is able to perceive with his mind, but not with his eyes alone, but with his mind regarding the nature of the wood that is making it appear the way it is. So that is what I mean by the level of your perception. So it is not just the physical perception, it is about your mind's ability to calculate about what makes it the way it is when you perceive reality around you. So the seers, they were adepts at this, and they were able to perceive and make these analytical processes within the brain. But then they put it down because you do not have the machinery that we have today. So they had no means of except through words and codes and stories to decode. They had to codify all of this knowledge, hoping that someone or the other who is more who has an experience of it will realize what these are. But meanwhile, the knowledge had to be passed down, which is why we find a lot of aspects, in many cultures, we find that knowledge has been passed down in the form of stories because only for the fact that it stays interesting. It stays interesting. People pass it down at least for the thrill of it, for whatever superficial action is happening in it. But you see that all of these stories they hold a lot of knowledge and information within that. And in this current era, we have all of the right necessary machinery, the tools, and the language to communicate the reality of what these aspects of Daiva Vipashya Chikitsa and Sattva Vajaya Chikitsa are all about. So you see that Yukti Vipashya limits itself to the physical um, correction of the body. We do talk about psychological conditions, but we find that we do not approach it through a more deeper perspective. We understand them through the doshas and the dhatus, even at that level. So when you go deeper, what you will be looking at is not just the physical dhatus or the functional doshas, but you go beyond this. You go beyond it into understanding what is making your software work. So you need to think like a hacker. And as we all know, to think like a hacker, you need to be that sharp. And so that is the sharpness that you require to go into the deeper subjects or deeper analysis of the human body and existence. And what happens when this harmony gets disturbed. So this is what we call as diseases of the body and mind. And in the science of Siddha, they have an understanding of the body on three dimensions. They call it the Udal, the Uyir, and the Anma. So they understand and classify the diseases. They say that there are 4,448 diseases, and that's very specific, and it's very what is it? It's very unique to the system of Siddha that they have fixed enumeration of all the diseases, the total number of diseases that will occur to mankind. So they say that this out of these 4,448, a set of it affects the physical body, a set of it affects the will, which is the manas or the mind that we consider in Ayurveda. So the will is not just the mind. When you go into the deeper aspects of yoga, we understand that the prana and the manas are one and the same. The dynamic state of the prana is labeled as manas, and making this still is the whole purpose of yoga. So what they call as Uyir in Tamil translates to the manas of Ayurveda, and the Anma or Atma is the third dimension. So in our classical texts that we study and we understand the Atma, we say that the Atma has no gunas, that it does not suffer, it doesn't experience anything as such. It's just a viewer, it's just a bystander who's seeing all of it and making a note of it. So it's like a memory card storing information. It doesn't really get affected by what's happening. But we see that the Siddha understanding of the same thing goes deeper. So they do understand this, but they understand that it is this information that your Atma is carrying, which your consciousness is carrying, that determines what you go through, what your physical being goes through, what your mental being goes through. All of it is determined by this most subtle aspect. So if we fix this, then you transform, you break out of the loop of life. So this Odal Uir Anma is nothing but the three-dimensional understanding of the body, the physical reality, the energetic body, and the subtle, the information within you that is making you the way that you are. The reason that you look the way you are, the speak the way you are, personality, your actions, and what your experiences are as well. It's not just limited to physicality, but even your reality, your specific reality is determined by this innate information inside you. So this is where Deva Upashya goes into. And if you correct this, you're basically hacking into your own existence. You're going beyond the mere physical reality that we are bound to. So its relevance is even more in today's age, like I was saying, because we have the right medium of translating these concepts. They're not concepts, but science of these facts. So we have the right language, we have the right medium, and you have the tools to show it as well. It's not just something that is up in the air and theoretical and philosophical, but it's practical science.